And it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer, really, standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And we are coming at you live on the Dark Matter Radio Network from on top of a mountain in Maine. And it's Wednesday. Our shows are Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 1 a.m. UTC/GMT. We have a jammed-packed show for you this evening, and we're doing a little celebrating. This is our 100th show. Yay! And we also have 10,000 likes on our Facebook page this week. So we're going to have a couple of extra people coming in to join us. And our guest tonight is Open Minds Radio and TV, Alejandro Rojas. Before that, as I said, we have a couple of people coming on. There will be no astronomy segment this week. Andy will be back next week, and he's going to be talking about dark matter, whether it really exists or not. We really don't know. Right now, I have my former and severely missed co-host, Michael Lauck, joining me. Are you ready to kick around a news story like the old days, Michael?
Well, you know, first of all, congratulations on 100 shows, Martin.
Thank you.
And as you were playing the intro, I'm sitting here, and you emailed me today and said, "Hey, when you come on, let's do a news story." And I'm sitting here now. The intro's rolling. I'm looking at this news story, and all I can think about is how many retakes did we used to do back when the show was not live? We used to re-record the news sometimes 5-6 times.
Oh, but it was so much fun. But you're right. Sometimes we just said, "What the hell was that?"
Oh,
and,
we said a lot worse than that.
Yeah, yeah. If only they could hear behind the scenes. There was some. I should have saved some of that because it was absolutely ridiculous. The retakes and all that. That was a lot of fun. But, you know, you are missed, you know, and I really appreciate when you came in and you helped out a while back and interviewed someone. Who was that you interviewed? I can't remember.
That was John Ventry.
That's right, yeah. A lot of email about that. A lot of people missed you. I'm sorry the way your job works out, the live shows don't seem to work too well for you, but that may change someday. Who knows?
Well, until then, you can always count on me as the reserves.
Yes, and that'll be great. So, do we have a news story? We do.
We do. We have a special 100th episode news story. Let me pull it up here. Take a deep breath. Try not to drop the F-bomb, which was so frequent in those recordings.
That's right. Okay, take one.
All right. Yeah, exactly. And first up, you know, I'm not going to do remember the old intro? I'd go through everything and remind everybody to check us out on Facebook, podcastufo.com.
Oh, yeah.
All of that good stuff. But instead, we'll just jump right in with the 50th anniversary of the Solway Spaceman photo. And this is one that I picked because I think a lot of American UFO enthusiasts will not be quite as familiar with it as some of our European listeners.
Right.
And in late May 1964, fireman Jim Templeton snapped several photographs of his wife and daughter at Burgh Marsh near his home in Carlisle, Cumbria, the UK. Once they were developed, it was pointed out to Templeton that there was something strange in a photograph of his daughter, an odd white figure that Templeton claimed he had never seen. The figure resembled a man in a spacesuit and was not seen in any of the other shots. The strange photo was picked up by the Cumberland News, and that newspaper story resulted in wider coverage from the Daily Mail and other news outlets. Templeton would later claim to have been visited by two men in black, and that sightings of similar figures by scientists would result in an Australian missile test being aborted. In the years since the photograph was taken, it has been suggested that it is merely an overexposed image of Templeton's wife. There was an aborted Blue Streak missile launch just days later, but records seem to indicate that the launch was canceled by automatic safety systems. Links to the BBC coverage of the anniversary, an investigation into the Australian Blue Streak missile story, and a video of Jim Templeton telling his story will be included in the show notes at podcastufo.com.
Yes, indeed. Yes, if you're right now, actually, if you're listening live, you can jump over to our website, podcastufo.com, and you can see the picture right on our homepage. Also, please join in the chat room there. It's a 1-2 click sign in real quick, and you can ask our guests tonight any questions. You can chime in, and you can argue with each other and say silly comments like you often do. I know everyone's listening, and here they come. Here come in the comments. Hey, this picture, I think it's one or two things, Michael. It's either this is an interdimensional traveler, or she's got a spaceman growing out of her head, like a Siamese twin or something. It's an oddball picture, that's for sure.
The first thing I did was I just blew it right up on my iPad. And just took my two fingers, stretched it out. Nothing complicated, no kind of crazy photo analysis. And once I did that, and I took a good look at it, you can tell that by the shadowing, basically that the arm is bent like at the elbow in such a way that the person is obviously, or whatever it is, the figure seems to have their back to the photographer. Once you do that, and then you go, well, then if it was a person backwards and there was hair, that would be darker. Yeah, I'm surprised that this photo ever caused the big deal it seems to have 50 years ago.
Right. There wasn't the Photoshop, there wasn't the hoaxing. I don't think there was any hoaxing, or if there was very little of it, I would think, compared to these days. And, it looks like an innocent shot of a cute little girl and this thing growing out of her head. So, yeah, I mean, I can see why that would, cause a lot of stir. But you're right. If you really look at it the way his arm is, I think that is a person's back. But they're kind of elevated. That's the kind of strange thing about it.
Right, and I would guess that if this was analyzed like it was supposed to have been 50 years ago, there's probably a pretty good estimate of how far it is between the horizon and the little girl who is the subject of the picture. If that's the case, you could probably relatively easily figure if that could be Templeton's wife. I mean, figure out what her height is and all that kind of stuff. So it's one of these things that although it was a major case in the UK and very influential, I look back now and I'm just like, wow, what quite was the big deal? Plus, I wanted to make sure that I brought you guys something today that I could kind of not get behind, because I know there's a lot of people out there who are convinced that I am a disinformation agent. So
yes, well, we know that. Well, you know who you are, Michael, is you're someone that always kept me on the right track, actually. Like when I was going a little conspiratorial, or I started, dissing Greer or something like that. You kind of reeled me in a little bit. And
there was some reeling on that, yes.
Take two, yeah. No, we had a lot of fun, though. And, Michael, I really appreciate you coming on. And it's always a blast to have you on. And you want to sit in? I'm going to pull in one other guest real quick here. Or you said you've been up for 20-some-odd hours or something like that.
I've been up for a while, yeah. I got a few more minutes, so.
All right, so I'm going to pull in the next person here. Hang on just a second. This is not as smooth as it could be, but it'll still work.
Is this going to be my favorite Facebook girl?
I think so. Hopefully she's ready. I saw her in the chat room. And it's Peggy Shunning. Are you there? Peggy? I think it's one of those things where her mic is muted and she doesn't know it, because we can't hear you, Peggy. Okay, Peggy, I see that you're on Skype and we're all signed in, but we're not hearing anything from you. So
How about that?
That's a little better.
Okay.
This is live radio, damn it. How are you, Peggy?
Yeah, I did that on purpose.
I know.
I'm good. How are you? Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Hey, I thought you had a microphone.
Well, you made me get this headset. I have it on.
Oh, you do?
And I thought I did everything, but I forgot to push the little button on it.
Okay. Hey, so Peggy, I am having you on this evening because I want to quickly thank you for your very, very hard work on the Facebook page. And if anyone out there listening hasn't been on our Facebook page, if you want the latest UFO news, astronomy news, Peggy is at it every single day, working hard. And even with her sore back or anything, she's really hard.
24/7, Martin.
That's right. Yeah. So we hit 10,000 likes this last week.
I know. It's exciting. I think my husband was as excited as we were.
Really? Awesome.
Yeah.
What a good guy. So I'm sure people want to know, how on earth do you find so many stories? And you sometimes you're the first one to break a story.
Well, Google is my god, you know.
Uh-oh, Michael. Michael has Michael. Don't you have something against Google?
Oh, I have a lot against Google. Yeah.
A lot against. Well, Google has served me well. I get the Google alerts, and then I subscribe to dozens of other sites on Facebook that post things, and then I just troll the internet. Wow.
So you're one of the trollers. Yeah.
I'm a troll.
Yeah. Well, you've done a heck of a job, Peggy, and you're always fun. And, you know, I got to say, Peggy, you contacted me pretty close to the beginning of the show. You know, I think I was in, like, show number 20 or something like that.
Probably was a criticism.
And it was definitely criticism. And, you know, it's funny, when I first read it, I said, who is this? You know what? And,
and you're right.
And then, you know, I started thinking about whatever your comment was, and, you know, she's right. I shouldn't do this or that. And you have helped guide me along the way, and you've also screened a number of guests, and we actually haven't interviewed a number of guests because of your screening. And it's always gone really well because of your balance and your great sense of humor. And it's been a real pleasure.
It's been a lot of fun for me. It really has. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
And I want to thank you, too. You're almost always on the chat room and, you know, getting people going there, and that's always a blast. And sometimes everyone in the chat room just says some really funny things while the guest is on. Now, I don't want to scare away any guests by saying that, but I'm telling you, you know, there's a lot of times where I have to mute the mic and have a little bit of a laugh.
I know. It is fun. I wish more people thought about it, would come to it, because it's a lot of fun.
It is. Yep. And you can go there now on podcastufo.com. It's right on the sidebar. 2 clicks and you're in. Mm-hmm. Well, I think...
Well, congratulations, Martin. You've done a wonderful job. You're great to work with, and it's been a joy knowing you.
Well, how's the pay? No, let's not get into that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, what can I say to send some money my way, Martin?
That's right.
I love you, man.
All right. Hey, thanks. And
okay.
Are we good to go, Michael? It's been a real pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Come back, Michael. We miss you.
Like I said, count me as the reserves. Everybody needs a backup. And once again, congratulations, Martin. I still listen. You know, I didn't totally run away. I still listen. I might be a week or so behind sometimes because I am one of those people. I listen to the podcast, but But last week was Stanton Friedman, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I'm current and everything.
Yeah.
All right.
And I still love the show. You're still my favorite out there, Martin. So congratulations, man.
Hey, thanks so much. All right. I love you guys.
Take care.
All right. So now you guys are going to have to hang up while I pull in my guest.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, Martin.
Bye-bye. All right. We got Alejandro Rojas coming up. Again, you can jump in the chat room at podcastufo.com. It's right on the sidebar. And Alejandro, are you there?
I am here.
Hey, how are you, man?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thanks for joining us for our 100th show.
Yay!
Yeah. It's pretty exciting. We just had Michael on that was on in the beginning. You know,
I heard him.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You listened, yeah.
Yeah, he's very funny. He was making me laugh.
Yeah, he's a good guy. So
Nice to hear the behind the scenes. Although it's hard to imagine you dropping the F-bomb, on a regular basis.
Well, when we knew it, we could edit. That was the thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I got to tell you, some of those newscasts were so funny. I just wanted to go with it. Then you have to change your thing on iTunes and probably lose a number of listeners.
Right.
Yeah. So we had to clean it up a little. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to keep it clean too because the kids deserve to have the info too.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And without them, who's going to be the next generation coming along?
I know.
Yeah. Well, we could always teach them to swear because they're going to eventually anyway.
Yeah, true.
No. So, hey, thanks for joining us. And what's going on? I know I saw the letter you sent to the U.S. Air Force and read that through, and I thought that was really interesting. I mean, you always have a lot of things going on. Before we get into that letter, I was just talking. You were listening live. I was talking to Peggy, and you're another person out there that gets the news fast. And I know you don't want to, drop your secrets out to everyone how you do it, but is that something that someone's working on? Do you have like interns or what's going on there? Are you doing it all yourself or do you have help?
Well, if you've seen that show Person of Interest, it's sort of similar to that. These big networks that are combined. We have a room-sized computer, kind of like NORAD, where we're tracking everything on a big screen. No, actually, Peggy's methods are probably very similar to mine. It's mostly kind of like she said, getting out there. You got to get out there first and search, and look for. And don't be opposed to. See, I'm going to give away a secret, but that's okay. Looking at international news. A lot of the news tips I get on international news. In fact, today was kind of funny. I found a story about an Australian incident, a near miss of an airplane with a UFO in Australia. And I found this on an Italian site, and I thought, wow, this is really cool. I hadn't seen it anywhere else. I posted that today thinking, all right, I've got a scoop here. The Italians are the only ones to have this story so far. And then I noticed that UFO Chronicles posted it 2 days ago. So, I appreciate everybody in the field. I think there's a lot of cool people doing this kind of stuff. So it's fun to kind of have friendly competition that way. But, it is really fun to get out there first with the story. The Chinese story, I think I was the first to post that as far as I know here in the U.S.
Are you talking about the
Chinese,
the possible space debris?
Yeah, the space debris. Now it seems pretty firm that it was off of the Russian rocket that had blown up on the same day. But, that's what I'm talking about. And that story has still gotten really big internationally. It keeps going. And then, a few days after we wrote about it, Lee Spiegel wrote about it with the Huffington Post, and that seemed to reinvigorate the whole story. And then, luckily, he has a lot of people, a lot of mass media, the big guys looking at his story, so more people started writing about it. So that one has really got some legs. But, just keeping at it constantly all of the time. And one thing Peggy probably does that I don't is monitor stuff on the weekend so much, so that gets her ahead of the game because she can scoop us on those weekend stories.
She's listening too, so keep that in mind, Peggy. Work a little harder on the weekend, okay? So, hey, Alejandro, I don't know if I ever had this conversation with you in the past when we met last year, and I know I was on your show and you were briefly on my show before, but what got you fascinated in this subject to begin with?
I really, when I go back to the root of it all, I think it's a combination of things, a combination of the left and the right side of my brain. I really connect with, my Native American roots. My family goes back in the Southwest, especially in Colorado, for many generations. And, in the Native American and in, the Mexican culture, certain phenomena in Mexican culture, such as witches and brujas, that kind of thing is more open. With Native Americans, you have a lot of mythologies and stuff like that. So, but I was always open to it, especially because I was raised a Catholic, and I thought, well, if I'm going to be open to these mythologies, I should be open to the mythologies of my ancestors as well. And so I was open to these ideas. At the same time, when I was in high school and beginning in college, I was very into science and space, but it was more of a pragmatic type of thing where I was into mathematics and proving things with math and science. And so I was into all of this, and I kept an eye on UFO things, but it kind of hit a critical mass for me, I guess, when it came to the Disclosure Project. You were talking earlier about talking crap about Greer, and certainly you and I have shared our concerns before on the air, but I've got to admit that, Greer's Disclosure Project, when he put together those witnesses that were so impressive at the Washington Press Club, by then I was into journalism. I headed that direction, and certainly a news hound, which I still am. And when he didn't get, the recognition that I thought he should get because of the impressive, incredible anecdotal information he presented, something snapped in me. I thought, I need to find out more. How did I not know about these guys before? Because I watch all the documentaries on TV, and I just became a hermit for the next year or two, reading and researching all day and all night. Then I became a MUFON field investigator, and that's kind of where it started. I kind of caught the bug at that moment. I was already into this stuff, but then, ever since then, I've devoted more and more of my life to studying and sharing information on this phenomena. And how has it treated you? It has treated me good, bad, and indifferent. I guess it's certainly a roller coaster ride. Yeah. And I saw the evolution of some of the luminaries, such as J. Allen Hynek or Jacques Vallée, and some of the mentors that I had, such as John Schuessler, who was in Colorado at the time running MUFON, and Stan Friedman, and many of these guys who've been in this field for decades. And you can kind of see this evolution of going from this high energy to kind of a research mode, and eventually interested but cynical. Yeah, and then I think we had this conversation too. Some just go wacky, And a lot go wacky. You're right. And I think you either go extremely cynical or wacky, and it's hard for people to stay in between. But some do kind of keep that middle ground, which is really important. Stanton Friedman, he's the one I would think. Right. Right. What is this? I'd agree. The saying you hear out there, and that's something like, if you look hard enough out at it, it'll start looking back at you. I think, some people have that type of attitude, and some people have just kind of like snapped, gone off the deep end, and without even really looking into what they're talking about, and it's kind of scary, and unfortunately, when that happens, the whole realm of ufology loses a couple of notches, and I've gotten past that point. I've gotten past the point of getting frustrated with what happens to ufology or how ufology is viewed, and to where I look at that more of a sociological level. I guess for me, it's certainly a case of swimming through the static to look for those little pearls of truth. But you've got to keep digging through that static to find these things, and then when you're able to present it, like I love my Air Force letter, because I was able to put a lot of kind of jewels that I've ran across over the years together in one piece. But I think you just got to focus on that. I think I get less worried about the effects, how people see ufology, because that's something that's out of your control. Yes. Things will flow whatever way they do, and you can just watch it. But what kind of I have to work on is when people, which they always are, and I'm sure you get this too, get really frustrated with you. And I guess they just don't, and for me, or, if you feel this way too, but, where it's like I'm just, working really hard to find these kernels of truth to present to everyone, and we have a shared interest. But people get really, really upset when you don't focus on their worldview or what they think the focus should be. And for the most part, I don't let that bother me, but sometimes it does get to me, and I wish we could just kind of all be cooperative and respect each other's opinions and different viewpoints, because I think, thank God, that there are so many different points of view and people looking in different directions, because there are certainly people making discovery and finding great things in places I'm not even focused or looking in, and that's great, because then we're all able to share and put our heads together and hopefully get somewhere. Yeah, no one really has. I asked Stan Freeman last week, do we feel like does he feel like we're any closer? I think he said he actually does in a lot of ways, but, to actually, I personally think that we're not any closer to finding the answer myself, but, we have a couple of questions up on the message board before we get into your letter, and let's see, I'm sorry, yes, someone wants to know about your MUFON experience. Early on I got involved with MUFON. I decided if there's something to all this I really need to talk to. Now that I've read everything I can get my hands on to read, I read many, many books, a lot of the classics, I think, in the field. I decided now it's time to get out in the field to talk to some of these people who are witnessing things and kind of test some of these numbers, such as Blue Book saying, that maybe 10% of these things are real, the rest are hoaxes or misidentifications. And so I started doing field work and then becoming an investigator, then also helping the local group. The local group, luckily, was where national headquarters were, so I got to be involved with first being a treasurer and then helping put together the symposium and then eventually becoming the official spokesperson for MUFON for a period of time. Really? Huh. And this entire time, I guess because I knew John Schuessler, who is one of the founders, really well, and I understand their point of view, which is simply the pursuit of scientific understanding in this field, that I've always appreciated that mission. Also, their efforts has been able to create this humongous network that across the country that is unrivaled and I think really important. That there's no other country that has anything like this. So I've always felt MUFON was important and always have been involved with MUFON. I could even announce today we just made a great new partnership where Roger Marsh is going to start writing for us now, so he's going to be posting all of his stories. He's the director of communications for MUFON, so he writes up their sighting reports and then works with state directors on their solved cases to write up stories about the result or the research cases, so he's going to be posting that with us. Wow. I've always appreciated MUFON and tried to do what I can to work together with MUFON. So I'm a big MUFON fan. I've been, been able to see a lot of the behind the scenes, and I think a lot of people have a lot of frustrations. I mean, when I was the PR guy for MUFON, I faced a lot of and had to answer a lot of these questions. It gets back to what I said before. MUFON has this stated mission. They're looking in a certain direction. They're boots on the ground. A lot of times more nuts and bolts, but we need that. And we need that focus. I think MUFON can and should be at the SETI of UFO research. Are they going to be able to do everything that everybody wants them to do? No. That's not their mission. That's not what they're doing. They need to do what they do. If you want something different, then go join another group or go start your own group. There's no problem with that. That's great. But I think a lot of times people want MUFON to be everything for everyone, and no one can really do that, especially when you're dealing with a volunteer organization where these people are trying to fit in a few hours of their time. These are parents, these are people who work full time, and they're trying to fit in a few hours here and there to do this sort of work. And you can't expect too much from these guys. People, doing that. Volunteer organizations are all pretty much like that. I think anybody who's been in a volunteer organization realizes that. So I think a lot gets done for a volunteer organization, and I'm a big MUFON advocate.
Okay. Well, there every once in a while you hear a little controversy about MUFON here and there. Like, what are they doing with all these files and stuff like that? We don't really have to get into any of that. And I appreciate the work you did. Well, the great
thing is, just to your point, is that Roger Marsh is that guy to get that information out. And he has been doing that. He's been doing that on the website, the new website, which is great now, and through Examiner. And now he's going to be doing that through us. So we're going to be able to help get those cases out, get that information out. And they are very transparent. You can go... you could go look at all the case files, and people do and write about it all the time. So I know they work really hard to respond to those criticisms and to do their best to be as transparent as possible.
Yeah. Now, we have a question up on the message board, and Ryan wants to know the thoughts that you have on the astronomers, speaking of SETI you just spoke about, at Congress about the possibility of ET life.
Yeah, that's really cool. We had a Shepard Johnson, who's a guy who's written for our magazine, and he's a good friend, kind of online buddy of ours. And he was there, and he wrote about it on our website. He even interviewed Seth Shostak.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was really interesting in that it shows, I don't know if a lot of people remember that SETI, and this is represented in the movie Contact, a great movie kind of about... fiction written by Carl Sagan, great movie, and it shows the tough time how SETI wasn't taken serious for a long time. And I remember when I first got involved with this stuff, and I was even more into SETI at that point, they were made fun of a lot of times. Now, because of their persistence and their professionalism, they're taken much more seriously. Really, if you look at the media coverage for SETI, they're taken as true scientists and true pundits when it comes to the search for extraterrestrial life, and they are taken very seriously. However, unfortunately, and I think that's kind of a gateway to ufology, you got to take the idea of extraterrestrial life, especially intelligent extraterrestrial life being possible, to take the next step into whether or not we could be being visited.
Yep, won't go there.
Right. So I thought it was really interesting where the Congress didn't even really take SETI that serious in this last hearing, where they, some people, which I think is just so pompous and egotistical, kind of used it as they just kind of threw out their softballs, kind of threw out some jokes, and then didn't really pay attention to the thing very much. So that's really sad. But I guess what can we expect from a lot of politicians who don't seem to understand science very well, and without trying to get too political, are putting a blind eye towards other scientific efforts or findings out there.
Well, I've said this before on the show, and not to be redundant, but a lot of people have full lives, and they're just looking around them, and they're not really thinking about what's up and what's that we're just a vulnerable little ball out in the middle of space, can be hit by an asteroid or whatever. Nothing crosses their mind unless something happens, or unless they have a sighting themselves. Those type of things. Most people are just going about their daily lives.
Agreed. Unless it affects you directly, and I can sympathize with that. Why are you going to care? You got to take care of your kids. You got to pay your bills, everyday concerns. If it's not affecting your ability to manage your life, then it's not going to be a high priority.
Right. Hey, if you're listening live right now on Dark Matter Radio Network, you can jump over to our chat room and ask Alejandro a question, and that's podcastufo.com right on the sidebar. 1-2 click, and you're in. Let's see. Here's another message board question. What did you think about the TV show Ancient Aliens and the show For Pete's Sake? Is that actually a show, or is this a joke? I'm not familiar with the show For Pete's Sake.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that one either.
That might have been sort of a joke. But
yeah.
What about Ancient Aliens? What do you think about that show?
Well, my Achilles heel might be that I've got to be honest, but this is one man's opinion.
No. I'm probably right there with you.
Yeah, I'm not that big of a fan of Ancient Aliens, to be completely honest. I mean, anecdotally...
the message board is lighting up. No, I'm just kidding.
There it goes, this son of a... But, and the reason is it's a lot. I love the, people on the show. I've known a lot of those people on the show. David Hatcher Childress is one of the nicest guys. I think it's incredible that he republishes all of these books and everything, but it's highly, 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 highly speculative, and I think that is fun to speculate. There certainly seems to be a trend in this field, especially with the media right now, to kind of speculate and to just speculate for speculation's sake, which is fine. I guess maybe that's even a good thing, because hopefully that speculation will then turn into a large amount of people looking more into some of these ideas and whether or not they're legitimate or not. And certainly there are some true mysteries in some of this speculation, but it kind of comes to UFO reports where, that's maybe 10%. Do we have a true mystery? Whereas a lot of these things, I mean, to me, and this might upset some people, to me, this recent story about how they discovered most likely how they built the pyramids was really convincing. I mean, I think they really finally kind of are starting to figure this out, and some of these things. So that's the great thing about mysteries is they offer a riddle, and sometimes those riddles are the answers lie right here in terrestrial, right here on Earth, and with human ingenuity. But sometimes maybe they don't. There's a lot of unanswered questions, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Another question up here, and then we're going to go into your letter, I promise. Okay.
No problem.
Since you're in touch with a lot of UFO info from other countries, who are more open about the topic? I actually have an opinion about that myself.
Yeah.
And what keeps that info, sighting reports, etc., from ever showing up in the U.S. media?
It's a good question, I think. I think this is really interesting in that it seems to me really South America, the Latin countries, Asian countries largely seem to be way more open to this phenomena than Western countries. Some Western countries, such as Germany, are really against this stuff. I mean, they, a lot of countries, and the UK is about where we are.
I can't figure out where Russia is. They're kind of like, some parts of them they're like really interested, and then some parts are like really against, talking about it.
Yeah, they're kind of back and forth, but it seems their media is really opening up to it, especially lately if it allows them to take a jab at the West. But I think that they, because lately Russia Today has had Stephen Greer on and a couple other people looking into kind of poking at the conspiracy type of ideas. I think kind of trying to get some jabs into the U.S. and Western governments as this almost new Cold War seems to be ramping up. But those countries seem to be more open. The UK and the U.S., they're brothers in arms and very closely aligned. Of course, our media is much more into this topic than they were when I started this, that's for sure. And so is the UK media. They've got a lot of stories. They seem to become more and more into this as well. So that's a good thing. I think that reflects that the populations are interested in the topics. But those, I guess, would be the countries I would say that are more into it. I think, you've got South America especially.
Right.
You've got several governments in South America with official UFO investigative organizations, and they say they have no pushback from the media or from other organizations. The topic's taken very seriously. And although in the West, even in France, really France is the only Western country with UFO investigative organization, and they kind of walk on eggshells because they aren't taken as serious amongst all of the other governmental agencies, not like the South American governments are.
Right, absolutely. And so let's roll into the letter you wrote. And what spawned that, and there's a lot of information in that, and I encourage anyone to take a look, and it'll be in the show notes. There's a link, actually, in the show notes that leads straight to that letter. And so let's talk about it. Richard Doty, that name I've heard for years, and never happily.
Yeah, right. Doty for me is kind of like, maybe Doty's my white whale, because I guess it started with looking into Dulce, because I was in Colorado. I spent a lot of time in the San Luis Valley of Colorado. Chris O'Brien writes a lot about that, the mysterious valley, where there's a lot of phenomena and things like that going on there. Of course, I heard of the legends of Dulce and everything. So doing research into Dulce, I camped there. I went there. I looked around. I didn't camp there, but I did go there and talked to people who camped there and people who did investigations and did a lot of research. And the name Doty came back as to related to the origins of this legend that there are extraterrestrials. There were the extraterrestrial base there. Then looking into other things, Doty's name kept coming up. And so I just kept looking into all of this, and then I found this controversy where, Richard Doty was, for most of the 80s, from 80 to sometime late in the 80s, we don't know exactly where. He was an OSI agent, Air Force Office of Special Investigations at Kirtland Air Force Base. He honorably discharged in 89. However, sometime later in his career, he was kicked out of OSI. And nobody knows exactly why. He says it was because he was trying to help some spies and his bosses didn't like the way he was. But his stories are all bombastic and difficult to swallow or believe because, admittedly, he has spread disinformation and his stories change over time. So nobody knows exactly why he was kicked out of OSI, and essentially he went to work in the officers club, kind of like managing he was, the way Colonel Alexander puts it, he was the guy, if the officers wanted to play ping pong, he was the guy that had to go get him the ping pong paddles. So he was kind of, knocked down a few levels.
Yeah, I hate when that happens.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I want to ask you, have you received any official response from this letter?
Well, I haven't. What happened is Doty was connected with Dulce and all of these other legends. And, said he spread some disinformation, said he made up the whole Dulce thing. He wanted this guy who thought there was an alien base at Dulce to believe there was an alien base there. And so I wanted to find out what was the official story. I wanted to do some FOIAs. When I started working as a journalist with the press department for OSI, the lady there was very helpful, and she expedited my FOIA. She said once I got my FOIA request fulfilled, then I would be able to get someone to answer some questions officially for me. During this time, I had found some other documents that were not well known and were kind of hidden. related to this whole affair, and I eventually came to believe that I would probably receive those same files, and sure enough I did. So I think I found everything that they're willing to release, or perhaps all that they have via FOIA on this whole affair. But once I got my files, the story changed. She was not going to get me in touch with anybody. She said, if you want any more information, do more FOIAs. And I'm like, I don't need a FOIA. I've got the documents. I want someone to answer questions about these documents, because what these documents say and what the gentleman who's in these documents says are different things, and I need to know who's the liar here, the Air Force or this Doty guy. And but they wouldn't. She just said, well, you can put in more FOIAs. That's all we have. So the story changed. So she wouldn't let me get any official comment on that. And Colonel John Alexander, who was in the Army intelligence and had looked into UFOs and things, was a consultant, helped me with this, and he was kind of shocked in that. And he also told me, well, then attack this thing as criminal acts. Because what this is a man saying he committed criminal acts at the behest of the Air Force.
Wow.
They've got to respond to that. So when I wrote this letter, I wrote it from that angle. And surprisingly, at least to him and to myself, really, we still haven't gotten any movement on this. Wow. What I was able to find, were things such as Doty had lied to some senators. He had created hoax documents, including the first documents to mention MJ-12, the first documents to mention Project Aquarius. These are all things he hoaxed. He admits he hoaxed. These were documents that he was dispensing and that were dispensed during this time and have been lost to obscurity. When you read about MJ-12, you read about this Jamie Shandera guy getting these letters. You don't read about that there were documents out before that Jamie Shandera was partners with William Moore, and that William Moore had been secretly working with Doty several years, and that William Moore's story keeps changing over and over again, and that in the early 80s, before these documents were known to anybody, William Moore was going to a journalist and saying, hey, we have to write a book called Majestic 12 about this big conspiracy. And that author, Bob Pratt, who worked for the Inquirer, which at the time was reputable, actually, and he was a reputable journalist, said, well, you don't have any evidence here. I'll write a fiction book with you, but all this is, we don't have any facts to go on. And William Moore got upset with that, and the book never happened. But eventually these documents came out, and it's this whole history of a lot of these mythologies that has been lost. That really, as researchers, we can't ignore. And the reason it was ignored is just because this William Moore, who was a luminary in the field, had, when he came out with the fact that he had been working behind the scenes with Doty, the field was really upset about the whole thing, and they just wanted to forget it all. They I see Chris Lambright's on our in our chat room, and he was sitting in the audience when Moore admitted.
Hey, do you mind if I pull him in on Skype?
That would be great, because I've been meaning to speak with him, and that would be awesome. I'd love to hear some more from him.
Chris and I became friends in the last year. He's a great guy. And
that would be, because I've been meaning to.
Chris, you got to shut off. You got to mute the show. How are you, Chris?
I got it. Hey, how are you?
Good. Alejandro.
Hello.
Meet
how
Chris
are you?
Lambright. Hey, listen, guys. Just to let you know, we have 9 minutes left to the show, so we got to keep this a little on the short side. But Chris, you got some questions for Alejandro?
Actually, he was just mentioning the Pratt documents, and he also mentioned the first document that came out mentioning MJ-12, as well as the other documents that are called the Kirtland documents. And one of the things that I noted the other day in reading through the Pratt documents is there's a set of Pratt documents, and I think Kurt Collins had found these as well. And in those documents, Moore states, as he's talking to Pratt, that Doty had suggested that they file through FOIA for any of the information on sightings around Kirtland Air Force Base through the local AFOSI offices, which, if you recall, Stan Friedman, I believe, was involved back in the day in trying to get all this information from the AFOSI offices out there. But here's this document in which Moore is telling Pratt that it's Doty himself who is telling Moore, who suggests to Pratt, that, we should file FOIA requests to get documents from local AFOSI offices. That's how that original set of Kirtland documents was, so to speak, uncovered. But it points to the fact right there. It's Doty wanting them to be found. And those documents are what has led everyone to believe that all of these things began to occur in the August, September, and later in the year time frame. And I did write to Alejandro a few weeks ago and pointed out in one of the documents even that Greg Valdez has on his site that Paul Benowitz stated that Ernest Edwards had known all about this since January. So Paul's films and when he first met Doty, that happened early in the year, in January. But you'll notice there are no documents to cover this time frame. Why is there a huge gap? The Wetzel letter came out in July, supposedly was intended to get Moore or somebody from APRO up there. Moore supposedly gets called in, and Moore passes on to Pratt that Doty has suggested they file for it. So you can see what's happening here. Doty has been at the core of all of this from the beginning, not only in fabricating the documents, which Moore has supposedly claimed, but in ensuring that people would find and get out these Kirtland documents that seemed to make everything appear to be focused at around, the fall of that year. For whatever reason. Yes, sir.
Pardon me just one second. I still hear a little bit of feedback. You might have some sound coming through.
I'm sorry about that if I do. I don't have anything on here at all, just you and me that I know of. But anyway, sorry about that. If it is, it's something else. I don't know what. But anyway.
Have either one of you tried to reach Richard Doty?
I have not, and the reason is it's not important for me because a lot of what this story has been based off of in the past is what Richard Doty has to say. His story has changed over and over again. I don't feel that you can really trust what he has to say. I think we've gotten enough out of him at this point. So I kind of would like to maybe catch him in a couple things and ask him, why did you say this then, and then this then, and then this then. But I don't know that that's necessarily important. Not only that, there's a book, Project Beta, and also this new Magic Men, which was a book but now a documentary, which has plenty of interviews with Doty. So what I wanted to look for is what we know officially. So, for instance, even with this idea that, Edwards knew prior, which it does seem, that's who Benowitz had approached before. However, with these Kirtland documents, it does show that there was an official, or at least an official inquiry into what Benowitz was saying until later in the year in 1980. So were they just blowing off Benowitz for most of the year? Possibly. I mean, if some guy was coming and saying, I'm talking to aliens and they're flying around your base, I could see how that might not be taken very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Just to keep you guys in mind, we have about 4 minutes left. And okay. We have to end right on time because there's another live show coming up.
Mm-hmm. I think I want to make the point that when Benowitz called and spoke with Edwards first, which would have been in January sometime or other, Edwards put him in touch with Doty at the time. If you really read those documents, there is nothing in the documents that alludes to the fact that what occurred, the meetings that took place, Doty going to talk to Benowitz and taking Miller with him, nothing states that was the first time. Nothing there states that was the only time. It's simply that's the first time there's some documents that came out that included, and they gave Benowitz short shrift in those documents. Nothing alluded to the fact that Benowitz, you recall that it said Benowitz had been investigating these sightings, and never alluded to the fact that he had contacted Edwards. Edwards put him in touch with Doty, and I think if this was a nuclear weapons storage area with a surrounded fence and someone called and said, I want to talk to you about potential intrusions, they wouldn't sit on their hands for even 2 weeks before they would go up and visit him. So I think my point is simply, just because the documents came out and make everyone look that direction, read what they state. They do not ever state this was the only time that Doty had gone to talk to Benowitz or that any other communications had happened. In fact, there's a huge silence in that first 6 months before supposedly the Wetzel letter is sent down to APRO in July.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. We don't have much more there. Maybe I think you've talked to Edwards. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, I talked to Edwards. I talked to Doty. I talked to Paul Benowitz. I have several recordings.
So what did Edwards say, though? Are you saying that Edwards is part of a conspiracy where they hid another investigation?
Let me put it this way. I called and spoke with Edwards. It turned out later on, and I mentioned this in my book, that I hadn't realized it before. When I first spoke to Edwards, I asked him when was the first time he spoke with Benowitz, and he said October, sometime in there. I re-listened to the tape when I was writing my book. It wasn't, and I found out that a few weeks before that, he had had a meeting with the two representatives of Sandia that were there at the behest of the senator. And that's when I have a document that Paul, it's my fault for missing it at the time, but Paul had sent this to me, a log file.
But I guess, what does it mean to you since we're short on time? Are you saying that then they're covering up a true UFO event that Benowitz was bringing to them, or what do you think that means to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Paul got it on film. They knew he had it. The whole point has been to get everybody looking some other direction.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, Alejandro, I will be glad to send you a copy of the book I've got. I realize it's only a digital book, so it's kind of awkward.
I've got the digital book, so I've got to look through that, and I will. And in fact, I want to talk to you some more about this because I'm skeptical of that point, but I don't know. You have a lot more. Some information to that. I guess what I was searching for is the roots of these mythologies, which is really important. And we will be posting a video this week that is going to go into all of this as well, to put it together for people in a video format, which is a lot more digestible to people these days.
Hey, okay, so we're running out of time. Alejandro, real quickly, tell the listening audience where they can find you, your website, and all that good stuff.
OpenMinds.tv. So when you go to the front page under the government military section, you'll see Open Letter to the U.S. Air Force. That's where that is. But OpenMinds.tv is where you can get all of this. So check it out.
All right, great. Hey, and thanks for coming in for a chat there, Chris. And
sure, anytime.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. We'll stay in touch.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you both very much. So if this is it for the show today, if you missed any part of the show, you can catch it as a podcast. And a whole bunch of other podcasts, then they're all free. And that's on our website, which is Podcast UFO. You can also check out links to the story and our show notes, and as well as joining in the conversation in our forums. Our guest for next week will be Noe Torres and Ruben Uriarte. And so we'll have a couple of guests next week. That should be a great show. And I want to thank everyone for helping out. And also I want to thank, again, for you, the listener, for helping me put together 100 shows. It's been real enjoyable. I want to thank our guest, Alejandro Rojas, Keith Rowland, the producer for the Dark Matter Radio Network. Andy Fleming will be back next week. We have Carrie Lloyd Whitehouse for our music, Peggy Shunning for managing our 10,000 liked Facebook page. And remember to like us on Facebook for all the latest UFO news. You can check us out next week right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network and every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time right here on the show. And remember to jump in the chat room. This is Martin Willis saying good night.